host, Riri. Welcome to Reimagining Life from Pain to Purpose, where you'll find a community focused on resilience and perseverance, sharing untold stories of hope and rebuilding while dealing with major life interruption. This podcast is made by and for people in the process of reimagining their lives. We're here to raise the voices of those who often suffer in silence, living with chronic pain and/or disability. This space is for you. We encourage you to get involved. So stick around and let's jump right into the next episode. Welcome to episode 13. Today we'll be speaking with Dr. Kirk Adams. Blind since age 5, Kirk is the immediate past president of the American Foundation for the Blind. He previously served in the same role at the Lighthouse for the Blind. Holding a PhD in leadership and change, Dr. Adams works with companies to help supercharge bottom-line business results through disability inclusion. He feels blessed to have been provided with 3 crucial success factors as a child: strong blindness skills, high expectations, and a strong internal locus of control. And he strives to provide these success factors for oncoming generations of blind people. So let's talk to Dr. Kirk. So to give listeners a little perspective, could you please share with us what makes you a reimaginer?
Oh my goodness. I am a reimaginer because I am a person with a disability. I've been blind since age 5, and disability is an interesting word. I have an impairment. My eyes don't function, so I cannot see, but I am not in a disabling condition unless I don't have a good fit with the environment that we have created as a society. So the built environment, physically, digitally, information, communication, was designed and built by and large the majority population, people without disabilities. And if I encounter a situation where my visual impairment doesn't allow me to operate efficiently, effectively, then I'm in a disabling condition. And an example I love to use is if I'm in a meeting, I've run 2 major nonprofit organizations, so conducted many board meetings. And if I have my board agenda and my financials and all my reports in Braille, I'm a Braille reader. My impairment doesn't matter. I'm not in a disabling situation. I don't have a disability. If you hand me a stack of print materials that I cannot read because I can't see, then my impairment puts me in a disabling situation. So there used to be, the prevalent model still is a medical model of disability where it says a person with a disability is a normal person who's broken and needs to be fixed. And if medical science can't fix you, then you are less than, not equal to others without impairments. The social model is the one that really makes the most sense. And that says you're not disabled until your impairment doesn't fit with the environment. I know this is a long-winded answer, but often when I'm making presentations and talking about this type of stuff, I say, is anyone in this room, 5'2" or shorter? And someone will always say yes. I say, well, if you have something on a shelf that's 8 feet off the ground, you're going to need to get a tool, like a step stool or a ladder, which is an accommodation for the fit between you and your environment. Or you're going to have to find a teammate, a helper, a partner who's tall enough to reach off the shelf. So we're all interdependent. We all use tools. We all have physical characteristics, and we all have various mismatches with the environment. But people with significant impairments, those mismatches happen more often and are more significant. So I'm a reimaginer because I want to reimagine this world as designed to accommodate as many people as possible in as many situations as possible. So universal design, so that people with the broad range of characteristics can thrive in our environments.
That's a great answer. And I really like the way you described the difference between a limitation that you have the tool to be just fine with, and then anybody can be in a position where they're disabled. Absolutely right. So thank you for that. I think that's really helpful. So clearly you're a reimaginer of the term disability and so many things. Just give us a little bit of a behind the scenes look at, so how did you become this professional who works to empower people with disabilities? Sort of how did you end up where you were when you were in the height of your career?
Yeah. So my retinas detached when I was 5 years old. And at that time, kids with disabilities were not being educated in the local public school. The model was you would go to a state school and then bring your skills up to the point where then you could transition into public school. So I went to a school for blind children in the state of Oregon for first, second, and third grade. And I learned blindness skills, reading and writing Braille, traveling confidently and independently with a white cane. And at that time, typing on the technology was a manual typewriter. So I learned how to type as a 6-year-old. So, by fourth grade, I was ready to go to my local public school. I had typed my assignments and my spelling tests while the other kids were writing with a pen. But I was given 3 things that later in life, as a researcher, I learned were significant success factors for thriving as a blind adult.
Mm-hmm.
So I was given really strong blindness skills. I was given high expectations from my school and my family. My parents were teachers and my dad was a basketball coach, and they didn't expect to see anything less than an A on a report card, and they expected their children, including me, to be active in school activities and sports and things like that. So I was given those high expectations. And then the other thing was just a strong internal locus of control. So a sense in my bones that I could do what I wanted to do, and there were no limitations on me.
Wow.
And that came from my family and the school. So I was with 120 other blind kids. This was the late 60s, run by a bunch of hippies, and they took us out into the Three Sisters Wilderness area, backpacking, horse camping, building snow forts, climbing trees, playing in the tide pools on the Oregon coast. So those are 3 success factors that a lot of blind kids don't get.
Yeah.
For me, there was no question I needed to learn Braille because I was totally blind, but most people who are legally blind are not totally blind. So most people you would call blind who meet the definition of legally blind have some usable vision. So often there's ambiguity, like, does this kid need to learn Braille? Can they use magnification? Nowadays they say, can't they just listen to the materials? But for me, there was no question. I had to use a cane. I had to learn Braille. And then a lot of kids don't have high expectations from their schools or their families, and those low expectations get internalized. And then a lot of blind kids aren't placed in situations where they can develop that strong internal locus of control. So the opposite of that is the external locus of control, where you think things are happening to you and you can't really do anything about it. So another long-winded answer, I went through school, high school, got an academic scholarship to Whitman College in Walla Walla, graduated with an economics degree, Phi Beta Kappa, cum laude, could not find a job. I applied to some grad schools, got in, but decided I wanted to enter the world of work and earn money and marry my college sweetheart and have kids and buy a house and all that stuff. So I had the situation that so many young blind people have, is not being able to get the foot on the career ladder. So only about 35% of us are in the workforce.
Wow.
Compared to like 70% of the general population of working age work. Only half as many of us who are blind do. So I took a job that wasn't ideal. I actually went on so many interviews. I'd send out my resume and my cover letter. I'd get a phone interview. It would go great. They'd invite me in for the in-person interview, and I'd walk in with my white cane and my Braille note taker, and, confusion would set in the room as the employer, who'd probably never worked with a blind person before, couldn't imagine how could this blind kid, do a job as a financial analyst. Those were the types of jobs I was applying for. And then so I wasn't getting hired. And then I decided to disclose my disability in my cover letter.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a visible disability, there's a, decision point when do you disclose your disability? So I wasn't disclosing at first, and then I started disclosing in my cover letter, and then I wasn't even getting the phone interviews. So, I cast my net wider and wider. My resume landed on the desk of a sales manager of a small securities brokerage firm, and he had also gone to my same college like 12 years before. We had some of the same econ professors. He was also an econ major. So he called some of the professors and said, "Hey, this Kirk Adams is applying for a sales job. Could he sell tax-free bonds over the phone?" And I said, of course he could. So I did that for 10 years, straight commission, no benefits, no paid vacation, just earn your way.
Big risk.
Yeah, but I did it, and I made a fine living for someone in their 20s, and I did marry my college sweetheart. We're married 38 years now. We had our 2 children, we bought a house.
Wonderful.
I turned 30, and I got very clear that I did not want to do that for the rest of my life. I didn't like it necessarily. So I got the What Color is Your Parachute book out of the Talking Book and Braille library, and I followed every instruction and did the whole thing. And at the end, I got clarity that I should be in the nonprofit sector. I should be in a leadership role, and I should work to create opportunities for other people who are blind, to make the way easier for the next blind kids coming up to the point where they would want to be working. So, following the What Color is Your Parachute process, I set up informational interviews with people who were doing what I wanted to do. And I had a conversation with the woman who is president of Planned Parenthood of Western Washington, and kind of just told her the same story. And she said, "Well, I was also a securities broker.
Wow.
And I also transitioned to the nonprofit. And I strongly urge you to enter the sector through fundraising, to become a professional resource development person, because there's such a need in the nonprofit sector. And you've spent the last 10 years talking to people about financial matters and their financial goals. So your skills are so transferable." So I started applying for fundraising jobs, and probably rightfully so, not getting them because I didn't have experience. But I got a newsletter from the Talking Book and Braille library that said they needed to raise $200,000 or close one of their programs. And I called the librarian, whom I knew well because I was a constant library user of Braille books, and told her the same story, and said, "How about I come down and volunteer 20 hours a week and raise you this $200,000. That'll solve your problem. It'll give me experience. It'll give me something on my resume."
Yeah.
And she said, "Sure." So I went down. I got a book on tape from Recording for the Blind and Dyslexic on how to write grant proposals. And she assigned a library volunteer to me to read the Washington State Trust Directory, which was as big as a phone book, and it was only available in print then. So we went through, and I identified the foundations that I thought might be interested. I sent letters of inquiry. I got invited to write a couple grant proposals. I had what I now know as beginner's luck and got a couple of fairly sizable checks. And they said, we'd like to create a position for you. So they created a job for me. And they were administered by the Seattle Public Library. So my first nonprofit job was a development officer for the Seattle Public Library Foundation. I did that for 3 years, got very clear, yes, nonprofit is where I needed to be. I wanted to transition out of fundraising. That was my entry point. So I went back to school and got a master's in not-for-profit leadership. Had a couple different jobs, and then got a call from the Lighthouse for the Blind here in town, who said they wanted to start a foundation and a fundraising program, and they'd heard there's a blind guy in town who knows how to do that. Would I be interested? So my
Wow.
wife and I went in and toured and visited, and it was an amazing organization employing lots of blind and deafblind people in various businesses, including aerospace manufacturing for all the Boeing airplanes. And I took that fundraising job, and then was given more and more responsibility, became the general manager of administration, and the CEO, who was a sighted person. He was going to retire, and one of his goals was to have a blind person succeed him. So he said, no guarantee you'll get the job, but would you like to do what you need to do to be qualified for it? And I said yes. And to their credit, they hired a consultant who worked with me. We did a gap analysis of my knowledge, skills, and abilities mapped against what would be needed. And then wherever there was a gap, a development plan together. For instance, aerospace manufacturing, I didn't know anything about it. So I had to learn about supply chain and ISO standards and quality and all those things as an example. And then they hired a search firm. I put my name in. I was given that opportunity to become the CEO of a fairly large organization. I grew it from 27 million to 95 million in annual revenue during the 8 years.
Wow.
And we increased wages. We went from 150 to 250 blind and deafblind employees, and we increased wages by 40%, got everyone to a livable wage. So I was successful there.
Yeah.
And then in the meantime, I was recruited to join the board of the American Foundation for the Blind, which is the most historic, iconic blindness organization, Helen Keller's organization. And simultaneous to that, I started a PhD program in leadership and change, because I learned there was a huge vacuum of blind leaders. Most of the blindness agencies in the country are run by sighted people, which is unacceptable to me. It'd be like women's organizations being run by men,
Right.
or, organizations for people of color being run by white people. So I determined, just personally, that the best thing I could do to accomplish my mission of creating pathways for people who are blind to have an easier way than I did was to be a strong leader, an effective leader, to understand leadership. So I started that PhD program, somewhat similar to my experience at the Lighthouse. The CEO of the American Foundation for the Blind had been there a long time, who was blind. Talked to me about 2 years before he was going to retire to say, I'm going to retire, and I think nationally you are the best person to run this organization. So when the time came, I stepped off the board. I put my name forward. I talked to my wife first to say, if I get this job, are you willing to move from Seattle to New York? And she said she would, which was, bless her. So then I did that, led that organization. It was a financial turnaround. They were in a financial death spiral, and got that turned around. And your question was kind of what led me to the place I am now. So I know it was a long story, but I have the lived experience of blindness. I've talked to so many parents of blind kids who are just so scared for the future of their child. And this is a pivotal experience for me. We were putting together AFB's centennial year in 2021, and we went out to the New York Institute for Special Education in the Bronx, and our tagline was "No Limits." And we asked kids, we interviewed kids, like, what does the future of No Limits mean to you? And a little, 7-year-old girl, just with all the confidence in the world, the internal locus of control, she said, "I can be a helicopter pilot if I want to." And I just started crying, because I know that people are going to start telling her no. They'll start saying, "No, that's not possible." Or, she's going to want to do something, and someone's going to say, "Oh, that's too dangerous because you're blind." Or, blind people can't do that. And I know that's going to happen to her. and it breaks my heart. My effort is to, in some way, move us forward so that fewer little blind children hear no. So I want them to hear no less frequently. These are deeply entrenched social issues and dynamics and paradigms. I know I can't in my lifetime get us to the point where the outcomes for blind people are the same as for sighted people, as far as employment and income and high school graduation rates and college enrollment rates. Everything for us is either half as good or twice as bad of the general population. I mean, suicide rates, addiction rates, in any measure. So my goal is to do some small part with my professional knowledge, experience, networks, etc., to change that picture.
Well, I have to say, I mean, first off, that's an incredible story, and you clearly have so much drive and just motivation to keep, building and building. And you really took yourself all the way to the top. I mean, literally. And it sounds to me like you are making a lot of changes. I mean, the Lighthouse organization, you almost doubled the number of people, and you increased people's salaries. That's huge.
Yeah. And now I'm no longer with American Foundation for the Blind. I got clear early last year that I was ready for the next thing. So we moved back home to Seattle and have our first grandchild who lives a mile from us. So he's our delight. And I started a consulting practice because I really wanted to be able to focus more of my time and energy on outcomes as far as getting blind people employed. Running a large nonprofit is a beautiful thing. I love volunteer board members. To have a board that's effective, it takes a lot of care and feeding. And then, to lead employees and support them takes a lot of care and feeding. So I kind of looked at my calendar early last year and saw like 85% of my time was doing kind of support stuff, which was all great, but I felt like being more connected to the actual outcomes. So I'm working with companies to help them accelerate inclusion of people who are blind in the workforce. And right now, the most exciting thing, I've partnered with a cybersecurity company called Nova Coast. There are 750,000 open cybersecurity jobs in this country right now.
Wow.
And like I said, only 35% of blind people are working. So we've created a virtual training program that's accessible. Blind people can use it with their screen reading technology. They can sit for 10 weeks of 200 hours of training over 10 weeks and then sit for 2 exams, the Network Plus and Security Plus exams. And then once they're certified, this company, Nova Coast, has a staffing business. So they place people into cybersecurity jobs. And the vast majority of the jobs are remote, which is fabulous because whenever you do research and you look into the greatest barriers to employment for people who are blind, it's transportation and employer attitudes are always one or two.
Sure.
They flip-flop sometimes. But the fact that these jobs are remote, they're computer-based, so with our screen reading technology, we can operate in a computerized environment just like efficiently as a sighted person can. So we're getting it set up state by state. So the vocational rehabilitation agencies in each state, which are funded by the Department of Education, so they can pay for the training and the exams. And we've got our first successful student through and hired as a cybersecurity analyst 1.
Awesome.
We've got 20 students in the pipeline right now. 5 just started this month. So I think once we're up and running in, the 40 most populous states, just looking demographically, I think I can get 400 blind people a year into cybersecurity careers. And
that's so impressive.
Do that 10, 12, 15 years, and you've got thousands of blind people in a dynamic growth industry. And that can start changing the face of that industry.
Absolutely.
That's my long-term transformational change
Wow.
effort right now.
It's really exciting.
Yeah, it truly is.
That's awesome. Really fabulous. So I'm thinking about, all of these different things that you learned yourself and started doing, and now you're building these partnerships with these organizations, and then you have to build in, the vocational education and all that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think are the key things or things that make forming these partnerships and doing this sort of thing not necessarily successful, but make people want to join on and really move forward?
Well, I think it's aligning solutions. So there's a book called Forces for Good that really made a huge impact on me. And it is a research-based study of large-scale transformational change efforts that were successful. And they looked at 12 different ones. And Habitat for Humanity is really a good example. Started out, let's build a house for some people. And now it's a global systems change. And the premise was, in order to make anything really big happen, you have to align the sector. So you have to have government, corporate, nonprofit, and community. So in my case, there's the vocational rehabilitation system funded by Department of Education, which has billions of dollars. And their charge is to help people with disabilities find employment, and their outcomes are less than desirable. Then you have the corporate world competing for talent and needing to hire people and not finding enough people. Then you have community-based nonprofits who serve, at a community geographic level. In any community of any size, there's, some nonprofit whose mission is to help people with disability find employment. They have philanthropic dollars. And then there's the community. There's people with disabilities. There's organized groups. In the blindness field, there's the National Federation of the Blind, American Council of the Blind. So what I really do is, it's not rocket science. I start by finding an employer who has probably done something with DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. It typically starts with race and gender. And, it's companies that are predisposed to thinking that diversity is a strength, and then talk to them about expanding their thinking to include people with disabilities. And if they want to do that, then I do a discovery process. I'm an ethnographic researcher, and I interview their leadership and people from the other sectors, and I come back with a set of recommendations, which always are some variation on the tune of, let's get the right people from vocational rehabilitation in here. Let's get the right people from the nonprofits in your community in here. Let's get representatives from the organized groups of blind people in your community in here. And let's put together an alignment where everyone can bring to the table what they have, and it will help everyone fulfill their mission, fulfill their desire to have better outcomes around employment.
It's amazing. Awesome. Okay. So you've answered, you've told us so much already. You really covered a lot. What do you find the most exciting part of what you're doing now?
The most exciting piece is when an employer gets the tipping point. And for some, it may really feel like a risk hiring a person with a disability. Many employers have fears that are not data-based. They fear, will there be safety issues? Will other employees have a bad perception? Will our customers have a poor perception? Will this person be able to do the job? If they don't and I have to fire them, am I going to get sued? But there is data that shows that DuPont did a longitudinal study over like 40 years of disabled employees. So like productivity is the same. Safety is better if there's significant numbers of people with disabilities in a workforce. So there is a tipping point, about 20%. So about 20% of a department or a unit or a company has people with disabilities. There's some things that happen. One is safety gets better because everyone follows the processes and procedures. Absenteeism is lower, turnover is lower, employee satisfaction is better, customer perceptions are better. Walgreens, there's a gentleman named Randy Lewis who was the head of supply chain for Walgreens. He's retired now, but he had an autistic son, has an autistic son. And he was tasked with building a warehouse and distribution center in South Carolina. And he got buy-in from Walgreens leadership to design it specifically to be inclusive of people with developmental disabilities. So they got 550 employees, and 40% are people with developmental disabilities. And they've designed some technologies to support folks in doing their work. On their computer monitor, it may actually show a process that they follow or show a product. So it's set up somewhat differently. But, I was there last fall and spent the day with their management, and, they have, there are 20 distribution centers. It's the most productive, best safety record, lowest absenteeism, lowest turnover, best employee morale, all the things. And they have, they partnered with a small Anderson University, and they've tracked that data since they opened in 2007. So there's not a lot of it, but there is good, solid, academically sound research that shows the outcomes of employing significant numbers of people with disabilities as a strength can help a business's bottom line.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the other thing I talk about a lot is, if you read a book like The Talent Code about how people develop strengths through overcoming challenges, if you live every day with a disability in this world that is not built for you, you are going to acquire some unique strengths in areas like resilience and grit and creative problem solving and the ability to work in a diverse team and communication skills. So those are the characteristics that employers in the 21st century say they want in their employees. So the exciting part is when an employer mindset shifts from, okay, we'll hire a couple of people with disabilities because it's the right thing to do, to, man, I need to hire more people with disabilities because it makes my business better.
That's great. Yeah. That must be fascinating and so exciting to sort of see that.
It does happen.
Yeah. Ooh, that's really cool. So I'm just thinking about all of these experiences that you've had and all that you're doing. And it sounds to me like you've seen real progress. Progress may look different in different places and for different sectors, but I'm wondering, are there things, particular challenges or things that are most challenging that sort of haven't changed yet that you think, oh, if we could only get them to understand this, what would that be?
Yeah, well, it's been so intractable. The percentage of blind people employed may have gone up 4 or 5% over the last 15 years. So there has been some progress. But the fact of the matter is that for those of us who are employed, the majority, over 50% work for government or nonprofit, a much narrower band of occupations than the general population, much lower average wages and income. So there's no easy answer because it's a complex set of social issues. So you have to have complex ways to address those things. So, it's multi-pronged. It's some of the things I mentioned earlier, like our education system. We need to have high expectations of kids with disabilities. So that means working with the education system and families. My parents had never met a blind person in their life before my retina detached. So that's the case with many families with kids with disabilities. And then, high school graduation rates are lower, so we need to address that. And then college enrollment rates are lower, dropout rates are higher. So it's along the whole continuum. And then, early work experience, like less than something like 23% of young blind people get some sort of paid work before they're 25 years old, and like 70% of
Wow.
non-disabled people do. So that's early work experience. Then you have employer attitudes and transportation and technology. Again, it's a double-edged sword. If you hire me to do a job as a blind person and the productivity tools your company uses aren't accessible to me, if I can't access them with screen reader, then I can't do the job.
Yeah.
So, it's like in hiring a person in a wheelchair without, you got to come into this building that has 5 flights of stairs. It's not going to work well. But obviously there are bright spots and brighter spots. Even the ADA, the Civil Rights Bill for people with disabilities was passed in 1990, and that's a huge, huge thing. And now there's a bill being introduced by Senator Duckworth, kind of a companion piece to the ADA, which was drafted really before the internet world. So it's going to be the goal is to have a law that requires digital environments to be as accessible as physical environments.
Oh, wow.
So no one would build a building now without a ramp, accessible bathroom. Those things are just mandatory. So, the goal here is that it's mandatory that people design their websites and their apps so that people with disabilities can use them at the same level of the non-disabled person. So yeah, bright spots. So I don't know. Did you ever play Battleship when you were a kid?
The game? Yeah.
Yeah, the game Battleship.
Yeah.
So when you guess like 1E and you get a hit, you keep guessing right around there, right?
Yeah.
You don't go randomly somewhere else on the board. So I think it's find those bright spots and fan those flames and build upon those.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you're doing a great job of it. I'm also envisioning people listening to this conversation and being really inspired. Like, I want to help in some way. Like, what can I do? Are there things that people can get involved with, or how could, maybe a small business get involved?
Yeah, I join something. If you have someone with a disability in your family that you have a particular attunement with, there is an organization around that disability somewhere. Dallas-Fort Worth, for instance, has a Disability Chamber of Commerce, which is disabled-owned businesses, and they welcome allies. With search engine capabilities we have, you can find somewhere that feels right for you to connect. Join an organization, find your local nonprofit that serves people with disabilities. Even just call them and ask if you can come for a tour. That's a great starting point. If you haven't had exposure to significant numbers of people with disabilities, find your local community-based nonprofit that serves people with disabilities and call them and ask if you can come in and take a tour, and they will be so happy. And you'll learn a lot.
Yeah, that's sort of step one. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. And I'm wondering, so what you're working on, is that it's like at the national level? Is that correct? In terms of jobs and...
Yeah, both. I have some local Seattle clients who are here, but for instance, the cybersecurity stuff is very national. I want to get connected with the vocational rehabilitation in every state. Okay. Nova Coast is very well embedded in cyber. They're very entrepreneurial. They also have a business of putting on cybersecurity conferences. And I've gone to 2. I went to one in Nashville in March and one in Phoenix last October. And I got to talk to 100 plus chief information security officers from major companies. And I've got a list of 70 who say, they will happily interview any blind person who goes through our training program, which is called the Apex program, and get the certifications. So the White House, end of July, issued it's a national guidance strategy on workforce and education for cyber. So it's being addressed at the national strategic level. they cited 755,000 open cybersecurity jobs at that point. So it's a national. So this is the beautiful thing. So I was just actually on a call earlier because we're going to seek a federal appropriation to support the growth of this training program. Like the nation needs more cybersecurity professional.
Yeah.
In a huge way. There's a huge gap, and blind people need work. So let's solve two problems with one thing.
Exactly. It's a win-win.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. And if people are interested in finding more info about these things, how would they find it?
LinkedIn is great. I'm on LinkedIn every day. So it's Kirk Adams, PhD. And my email address is kirkadams000@gmail.com. So it's just KIRKADAMS000@gmail.
Awesome.
And I will happily talk to anybody, anytime, anywhere, if it will lead to a person with a disability becoming gainfully employed, having the dignity of work, obviously the economic benefits that come from work and a career.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Now we've come to our rapid fire 5 for 5 questions. Please answer honestly and quickly, whatever comes to mind.
All right.
So what's your favorite sound?
The Pacific Ocean rolling up on the beach in Maui, the Ka'anapali Beach. I was just there.
Oh, that sounds so appealing. What's your favorite word?
Dignity.
Nice. What's your favorite guilty pleasure?
The Young and the Restless.
Awesome. What's something that you've learned that you wish other people would understand?
That disability builds strengths.
Okay, and the last one is, what advice would you give to an 18-year-old you?
I would say, jump on this new computer thing. Computers were just kind of happening. I graduated from high school in 1979.
True.
And it was like, when I went to college, I had one of my roommates had the first kind of computer that I'd ever encountered. And I was using, there's a device called a slate and stylus to do Braille by hand. I was taking notes with a slate and stylus and then copying them with a Perkins Brailler, which is a manual Brailler. And the highest level technology I used during college was an IBM Selectric with an erase ribbon. And there were other people on campus getting into computers.
Wow.
And I would say, don't scoff at this computer stuff. Get on it.
That would be a good tip, a very good tip. All right. So those are all my questions. Do you have anything else you wanted to say or to add?
No, just I really appreciate you. I'm glad we met.
Yeah, me too.
I'm really appreciating what you're working toward and what you're building and putting together, and you're going to make a big difference in a lot of people's lives. And I love you for that.
Oh, thank you. I hope so. That's my goal. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining. Dr. Kurt's story is inspiring, and though it took an incredible amount of work and drive, it seems like an example of how far people can go with the right support, dedication, and education. Kirk applied the skills he learned as a child and throughout his life, and will tell you it's because of his family and community and education that allowed him to create a great life for himself and his family. Kirk benefited from the community, being in school around other blind kids, education, learning to read Braille and type and find his way around new places, and tools, such as learning to use a cane and how to make it through camping and rugged terrain. These experiences gave him confidence, community, and support. These just may be the combination of support and education so many other people need to help them learn to live in their new reality. Unfortunately, many do not have access to such support. Kirk's definition of disability provides a fresh perspective based on practicality rather than the traditional medical model of trying to fix someone. A person is only in a disabling position when they don't have the tools needed to adapt to what they need in that particular situation. One of the most exciting parts of Kirk's work, in my opinion, is showing employers how hiring persons with disabilities actually improves their businesses in a multitude of ways. In adulthood, Kirk put to use his adaptability skills, resourcefulness, and drive. He is a change maker, as exemplified in his becoming the first blind president of the American Foundation for the Blind. Of course, this required him to do a ton of research and skills building, purposefully learning to prepare himself for the many new challenges ahead. His passion is trying to help other blind people find careers rather than just jobs, where they can have a future and a livable wage. Kirk's working on exciting projects, putting together training courses for blind people in cybersecurity, an industry where there are 750,000 unfilled positions. After they complete their training, graduates are offered their first job in the field. Kirk's experience in bringing together all the different players has helped get this project off the ground in multiple states. The hope is this model will expand nationwide and be a game changer for the blind community. Kirk is helping open up a new world of opportunities for blind people and others with disabilities, and he's the perfect guy for the job. He exudes a calm, cool, and collected presence, putting those around him at ease, while he's actually rocking the boat and steering it to a completely new destination. Thanks for listening to Reimagining Life from Pain to Purpose. We're always interested to hear your feedback and questions. So leave a review and drop us a note at reimagininglifepodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram. We hope you'll tune in for the next episode.